Okay, everybody, I am going to test my microphone. I'm going to test my connection, and I'm going to put on my glasses so we can get started. All right, everybody, let's see who's on the stream with us today. So I'm going to check my phone and see. Let's see, I have Mildred.
Everybody, I am going to test my microphone.
Look, you can hear my phone, right? So I know it's working. So let's see, who do we have out there? We have Mildred. Let's see, where are you from? From New York. Hi, Mildred. We have Sonia, Arlene, Alicia. We have Anna from Indiana. So we've got people from Columbia, South Carolina, New York State, Washington, Texas, Indiana, Alberta, Canada. Hi, everybody. Looks like my connections are working. My stream says that it has an excellent connection. My microphone is working, so we are ready to go. All right, everybody. For those of you who got here just a little bit early, there is a link that I dropped in the chat, but it is a link to the bonus holiday gnome. So I thought you guys would be super excited to know that I went ahead and dropped the December gnome early, and I dropped a holiday gnome early. So I did that for you guys because I know that some of you guys are trying to get this quilt done in time for Christmas. I was going to try to get it done in time for Christmas too, and then this happened. So if you are a friend of mine on Facebook, and I'm friends with a lot of people on Facebook, you know that I had an accident with my rotary cutter, and I actually sliced through the side of my finger down through the nail pretty far into my nail bed. So I'm going to be doing a video on rotary cutter safety because I was not following good rotary cutter ergonomics or procedures, and look what happened to me. Pretty serious. I ended up going to the emergency room, so it slowed down my sewing but not my drawing because my right hand is still working. So what I've been doing is I've been sketching and drawing new things that we're going to be doing in 2023. So my finger might be injured for now, but my right hand is still working. So, all right. So let's go ahead and look at what we've got for today. All right, friends. So if you have been following this series, you know that every single month was a skill builder, and I taught something different related to applique. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about today is surface design. And so we talked about bobbin work last time. We've worked with fusibles. I've talked to you guys about using starch to turn the edges. And so now we're going to do what I call kind of fun detail work. So welcome, everybody. Say hello to each other in the chat, and let me switch my camera view, okay? So if you don't know me, my name's Yvonne, and this is the Jelly Roll Club. And we make lots of beautiful things. And so here's what we've got on the menu for today. So if you have already been to the website, you should have downloaded the November Gnome of the Month pattern. And so if you notice, it says that you should be making 2 this month. So you should make Mr. November and a little December gnome. And so let's look at what we have here. So these are 2 little friends, Felix and Jasper. So Felix is this little guy here, and he's a sitting gnome. So he's sitting down. You're going to recognize this little guy because we made this little gnome back in the spring. So if you remember back in the spring when I was teaching you guys about applique, so this is the same little gnome, but you're just going to change him up. And you're going to take this little guy, and see, look, I moved mine's legs. You're going to take this little guy, and you're going to sit him on the grassy knoll. The grassy knoll was part of an earlier pattern set. So if you have not downloaded the other pattern sets, download them all because all of these bits and pieces are all found on the different pattern sets. So that's what we have here. So we have Felix, and he has a little friend named Jasper. Jasper is the gingerbread gnome, as I call him. And so he is in here. I also put a twiggy tree for you. So if you want a twiggy tree added to your wintry scenes, you can add that to there. And so I included the line drawings for those 2 fellows. But then look what I did for you guys. This is another little creation, and he is just the turkey gnome. He doesn't have a name, so if you want to give him a name, you can call him something. I was going to call him like Henry for Henry VIII because he's got the giant drumstick, right? And so this is a bonus gnome. All you have to do to create line drawings for him is you can just take a Sharpie around his edges and then flip him over, and you'll be able to see on the back. And so if you ever have a piece of artwork that somebody created, like I created these, you can literally just take a regular Sharpie, trace around the front side of this image, and on the back you'll be able to lay this on a light box, and you'll have a reverse image of your gnome. So this is the bonus gnome for November. I also went ahead and I dropped gnome for the holidays. So gnome for the holidays is, voila, the December gnome, and he's a chunky guy. Look at how fat he is. He doesn't have a name either because I was playing around with trying to heal my finger, and so I went ahead and made him early. And so you have his line drawing that's mirror imaged, and you have the gnome. So this is the rest of the gnomes that I'm going to release. I will have some bonus content in December. I'm going to be doing some woolies. So I'm going to do a bunch of wool applique ornaments, some stockings, some other stuff. So we've got a lot of stuff still going on in the Jelly Roll Club. So just because the gnomes are coming to an end does not mean that that's the end of our channel or that we don't have other things planned for you guys. So that's what we've got going on. So let's talk about our gnome. So if you noticed in previous months, in the earliest months of the year, I had this pine tree. And so this is the pine tree that I'm going to put at the end down here at the bottom. And so I created this pine tree using, let me move some of this stuff. If you guys want to see some of my other blocks, this is what I have. I have the weepy tree. I have my mushroom house. I have my backwards rainbow. Yes, I did my rainbow backwards, and I don't care. He's just going to stay that way. This is Felicia, my girl gnome that I added, and I did a little bit of stitching to give her some braids. So as you can see, I've been busy, busy, busy. This is an extra gnome that I made. I made him earlier. Here's my little house. I need to embroider with some bobbin work, some rays of sun. He's got a little puffy mushroom, so he's kind of three-dimensional. And this was a needle turn lesson that I did with you guys. This is one of my gnomes, and he needs a little bit of embellishment. So he's my September gnome. This guy, if you notice, some people were asking, how did you get his beard to look that way? And that is what we're going to be talking about today. How to use textile inks and textile paints to make your gnomes look like this. Okay, so that's what we're going to be working on today. So I've got a lot of stuff. But this is my 4th of July guy. This is my pineapple house. I've got a few more things I'm going to add. This is my surfer man. If you notice, he's got what looks like sand underneath him, and I'm going to show you guys how I did that. My little spring gnome with the three-dimensional butterflies. And so I've got a lot of little gnomes. I made a bonus gnome. For those of you guys who remembered, I had a grandson in January, and so this is baby Nate. I'm going to be putting an eye and a beak on that bird. I also made one of my houses into a spooky house. And then here's the tree that I made back in January. So I've been busy too, just like you guys, making all my little gnome things. And I'm going to be putting this quilt together because our final live stream, you guys get to see the big reveal. I'm going to talk about quilt as you go for those of you who want to use quilt as you go. But that's where we are. We're almost at the end of this series. All right. So let's talk about a couple of things that I use to create designs on my quilt. And so I'm going to start with this first one. Back in January, you guys asked for the little sleepy tree. And if you notice, this fabric has little pine cones in it. And it has little bits of snow. And how I did that is by using what's called a textile ink. And so This one is made by Fabric Creations. I don't know if you can see that. But it literally says right on there, soft fabric ink. And let me show you what that is. So if you can see on my screen, and you can still hear me, I have an image of what I've purchased. This is made by Plaid, and it's a soft fabric ink. And if you notice, there's a feather. And what I did is I painted that feather on a piece of fabric to kind of test it out to see what it looks like. So it leaves like an opaque finish on your fabric, and if you heat set it, it can be washable. Now, I don't recommend doing this on a quilt that's going to be like an everyday quilt that you're going to stick in the washing machine on a regular basis, because this is not dye. It's just like almost like a fabric paint that goes on the top. And so this is what I'm using to make snow on some of these blocks, right? The other item I'm going to show you is fabric ink markers. And these are different than traditional markers because these don't run when they touch your fabric, right? So let me click back over here. And let me show you how I've done this. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is fabric, this fabric ink. This fabric ink can be diluted with water. So whenever I'm using it, I use my little spritzy bottle and I put a little bit of water on a dish. And then I just shake this really well. And this is great for wall hangings. If you notice, it's kind of thick. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm going to poke it with my brush. And so this is very, very thick. So if you notice, the texture is almost like really thick paint. You see that? And so I'm going to want to thin this down just a little bit. You can layer it and make like almost dimensional snow. So if you want, I just brush that on there. And if you want to leave little dabs of it and leave little raised peaks on, like, let's say a wall hanging, that's what this quilt's going to be. It creates almost three-dimensional snow. Now they have puffy paint, but it almost looks plasticky. This actually looks kind of natural. So if you wanted to, you could just brush it on like that. And let's say you had parts of his beard and you wanted parts of his beard to be more snowy white, you could do that as well. And this one literally just brushes on like you're brushing on a little bit of paint. It creates dimension. So for those of you who are familiar with fabric called grunge, if you notice, it looks like it has paint on it. That's what this looks like on your finished piece. And when it dries very soft. So I've already painted this. So if you notice, it still has some softness to it. It's not stiff at all. And so if you want to, you can take something like this little block right here. This is an extra block that I made for playing around. And you can take this guy, and I could add snow to the top of this little tree if I wanted to. Just like that. And so I could make like a little snow-capped bit of tree, right? Just like that. And if I wanted to make it heavier, I could make it heavier. So you just dab it. It gives it like a three-dimensional look, and this is super fun to do on wall hangings, right? So if you want to bring the snow kind of like this, you would just bring the snow down. And you could make little kind of irregular snow. You could put snow on your gnome. You could add bits of snow to the ground if you wanted to add bits of snow to the ground. So let's say that I wanted to add like a little bit of snow back over here. Like little little bits of snow back over here. I could add little bits of snow. Just like this. I could just kind of thin it down with a little bit of water. And don't be afraid to do this to your quilt. Trust me, it's not that scary. I mean, what's the worst thing that'll happen? It's your quilt. Do whatever you want with it. So you can thin it and leave just like little bits and traces of snow like this. And if you notice, if you don't like how heavy it is in one spot, just use a little bit of water. And this is a water-based. And then once it dries completely, you can heat set it and it will survive hand washing. So if you wanted to add like shadowing or whatever to your quilt, you can do that, okay? So these are lots of things that are possible with this. And so this is called fabric ink, soft fabric ink, but it's actually more like a paint, right? So the other thing that we could do to this, so if I wanted to do this, right, is I could highlight his beard. So if you notice, I could take his beard, and I did that to my gnome that had the house plant. So let me pull this up and grab this gnome over here. These are all sitting in my lap. Here we go. So if you notice this guy right here, I actually came in and I did really heavy work. So after I stitched his beard, I actually came through here and I wanted to do some highlights because I made his beard like a tan color. And then I just came through and I painted with this brush like this. I just gave him highlights. And so I literally just made his beard look three-dimensional by doing highlights. Just like that is how I added all of those bits to my gnome. And I love how it turned out. I could also do this to the plant. I could do other things to the plant, and I could do different things. So one of the things that I like is this fabric ink. And so that was fabric ink. Another thing that I love to use on my quilts sometimes are these fabric markers. And fabric markers come in a variety of types, but they should be specifically for fabric. Now, these particular ones are made by Tulip brand, but there are other ones, and they're specifically designed not to run when you use them on fabric. So for example, if I wanted to add some vines to this plant here, I could literally go like this. And this is going to stay right where I want it, and it's not going to run all over my fabric. So if you notice, I could add lines, and then I could use these to stitch over and add some dimension. But don't be afraid to use textile markers, textile paint, especially if you're doing a wall hanging. I just think it makes it look very interesting. It adds a little bit of dimension. I'm going to be doing some collage work next year on the channel. So for those of you who are interested in doing collage work, I'm going to be showing you all types of tips and tricks for making collages. I'm also going to create some patterns for you. There you go. See, so that's a lighter green. And so don't be afraid to come in here with your fabric marker and literally just add some awesome fun details to your blocks, because I think that it adds just a little bit of pizzazz. What do you guys think? Do you like embellishments on your quilt blocks? Who has tried embellishing their quilt blocks? So these are textile markers, and these are washable. Tulip makes a fine tip, and then they make some that have a broad tip on one side and on the other. But you can just buy these at most stores that sell art supplies. And like I said, don't be afraid to use a little textile marker to add some dimension to your wall hangings especially. I like to do this with quilts that are not going to get a lot of washings. But these could also be used. The fabric markers are permanent. And they make them for drawing like on those little canvas tennis shoes. And so that's what I would do with my fabric markers. And they come in a bunch of different colors. So if you wanted to do something red, I used the black to do the little seeds. And then I literally just embroidered right over the black. So I made the little seeds on my guy. So instead of drawing them on with a pencil, I drew them on with a textile marker like this, and then I embroidered over the top with my embroidery floss just to kind of give those watermelon seeds some dimension. Just like that. All of a sudden he has watermelon seeds all over him. And so I think those are the things that make the little blocks really pop. If you wanted to have like a grassy knoll like this and you wanted to add some little bits of grass sticking up and just stick it out, you could just make little bits of grass like the grass isn't mowed back there. And so you could add little bits of grass like this. You could take a little bit of the dark green and you could go in here and do little bits of grass coming up from the back. Like it's got a little bit of dimension. Just like that, you could make a little bit of grass sticking out from underneath the flower pot. And so I think that markers are something that most quilters don't necessarily think as one of their tools, but I love fabric markers. So that's one way of doing it. The other thing that you could use for this, you see how this gnome is like super plain? If I wanted to do a design on this particular gnome and I wanted to make, so let's say I wanted to draw like big circles on here. I could draw big circles and I could all of a sudden give this some texture because maybe the fabric that I found that was the right color was just a solid, because that's what I had in my sewing room. But I wanted this one to have dots, but I didn't have a polka dotted teal color that I liked, and so I could add spots to this. I could embellish this now with a little bit of embroidery floss, and I can even use some other types of textile paint on this guy. And so now, all of a sudden, I'm drawing these little swirls, and he's going to have a cute little polka dotted hat. And all of a sudden, my gnome goes from being flat to being looking like it's a little more finished. Does that make sense? Does anybody have questions about textile markers? Most of the time you have to let these dry and then you have to use a hot iron. So I put a pressing cloth and do a really, really, really hot iron. Let's see, Kim says that she uses fabric paint and markers with thinned acrylic paint with textile medium. Yes, you just have to add water, a little bit of textile medium. You can actually use regular acrylic paint. This is another type of paint that I use. I don't know if you can see that. This has actually a little bit of glitter and it's transparent, and it's called Soft Touch Fabric Paint. And you can use this with water. And I was using it on a little wall hanging that I worked on before I injured my finger. I'm a sucker for birds. I love all kinds of birds. And so let me pull this up. I made this this wall hanging. It was from a pattern, but when it was on clearance at a local quilt shop. But when I made it, I noticed that the fabric looked like it was yellowed a little bit. So I'm not sure how long the quilt kit had been at the store. So what I did is I took some of this. And one of the things that you'll find is that you can use inks. If you have archival inks, you can use stamps on your fabric, like this one that says, "Oh, happy day." If I wanted to put some of the ink-based, like alcohol-based. So if you have a marker like a Copic marker, you can put some of that on there and you can actually stamp onto your fabric, heat set it, and it should be very washable. Somebody asked about the 3D butterflies. Yes, there is a previous video. If you go back to the April video, you can see how to make the butterflies. But like on this one here, this one is a glitter paint, and it's the same thing as that other. You just drop it. This is nice and thick. And I thin it with a tiny bit of water. And this one is a very, very shiny. Shiny, shiny, shiny. And you can see the glitter in it. And so what I'm going to do with that is I'm just going to thin it down like this till it's the consistency of extremely runny paint. And I'm going to just brush right over all of these with this little bit of glitter paint. And it's going to take away that yellow cast. And if I wanted it thicker, I could always just take and add that thicker right on there, just like that. If I wanted it to look more like little peaks of snow, I could do that, and then it would just be nice and thick. All right, friends. And you just dab, 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 dab. If you notice, that gives the snow dimension. And it will get rid of that yellow cast that was on the snow. I don't know how old this kit was. I don't know how long it had been sitting on the shelf of my quilt shop I went to. But I thought this is a beautiful little winter scene and I want to hang it up for the holidays. So I went ahead and put it all together, even though that paint looked the fabric looked a little bit yellow. I thought, you know what? I'm just going to cover it up with a little bit of this textile medium and a little bit of textile paint, and it'll look just fine. And so if you notice, let me zoom down here so you can see that actually has texture now. So everywhere that I've been putting it has a little bit of texture, and when it dries, it'll dry kind of shimmery with a tiny bit of glitter. And so this is going to be a wall hanging. And so I'm not too worried about washing this too often because I can just brush it with a dry brush to clean the dust off of it. And so I want it to be kind of iridescent and have a little bit of that snow texture. And as you can see, this one was a little, see how it's a little bit yellow? And so this was my solution for this particular kit that I had purchased. And so I'm going to go like this. Right on those edges of the mountains. And this is the fabric ink. As you can see, it's much brighter than the fabric, than the soft textile paint. And so you just literally take the entire thing. I'm even going over my stitching lines because this has already been quilted. So I'm going right over my quilting lines, my bits of thread, and I'm good with that. And I'm going to paint, paint, paint right over the fabric and then blend with some of this watery paint until it reaches the other side. Okay, and so then when you see it, can you see the mountain? It almost glows. That white now almost glows. It's gotten rid of that yellow cast that had to it. And you can paint it. I like doing this after I stitch and I applique it down because then I can control where it goes. And I just brush, brush, brush all over it. All right, friends, don't be afraid to play with paint. Don't be afraid to play with brushes. I think that quilting is an adventure, and so don't be afraid. I mean, the worst thing that you can do is wreck a little bit of fabric, but all of this stuff really helps your mind, especially as you age like me. Once you are past that middle-aged hump, the golden period of your life, it's really important to kind of keep your mind active. And so using your imagination and your creativity is a great way to keep your mind active. So if you eat healthy and you use your brain for all kinds of things, you can just stay healthier. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm constantly creating and making things. And I will be making lots of new things for you to create in the upcoming year. So if you do not have any questions, yes, I did let them know, Lila, that it had some yellowed fabric. So there is my little bird. So let me lighten that up so you can see that. And you can see the mountains now look pretty good. I've already stitched all of this down. I've quilted it vertically and I quilted the snow. And I actually added a little bit more snow with some of my markers. But there it is. If I wanted to add highlights to the bird's wing right here and just kind of highlight the bird's wing, I could do that as well. And kind of show off his little wing right there. I could highlight the side of this bird's foot right there. And so you see, these are great for all kinds of little things. And I could now come back in, and if I wanted to, I could stitch that design. And so there you have it, friends. Super easy. These tools are not expensive. I stick to just a few basic colors. I usually keep white, black, and brown in textile paints. But these are great. The little fabric markers are what I use to make the beach for my little guy that was in front of the ocean. So if you notice the bottom of his block, if you notice what I did there, I just took my fabric markers. I did yellow, I did orange, I did red, and I literally just kind of went in here and made dots like this with my marker, and I made his little beach underneath him. And so that meant I didn't have to find special fabric, and that's all I had to do with him. My ocean, if you notice my waves, I added additional emphasis to the waves with the blue marker. And so I made that fabric have that texture by using this marker right here. All right, friends, if you guys don't have any more questions, that is what I wanted to share with you guys today, that creating beautiful blocks is fun and easy. If you don't like some of the things like this, so for example, I didn't like how some of these flowers looked underneath, guess what? I could always come in here and fill this in with a little bit of black and darken those out. Maybe they're just too bright. So you could even use them to color some of your batiks. Maybe they're just way too bright, and I could come in with a green. And so that tones down that limey green color. Just like that, of those batiks that I had in there. And so now it looks more like a dirt pile, which is what I wanted. And so I hope that you have learned a few things about using surface design on your quilt blocks. Most of my quilt blocks that I finished just have straight line stitching, nothing too fancy. Straight line stitching across here. I used a little bit of embellishment. This was my reverse applique block. And so I hope you enjoyed another lesson from the Jelly Roll Club. We have lots of fun things happening next year, so join us for an entire series. We're going to be doing Table Runner of the Month. I'm going to have a birds, like an art quilt process, where I'm going to show you guys how to do all of the birds that I watercolored and turn them into beautiful blocks of the month using birds. So you're going to love that series. We're finishing up our Dresden project, which is going to be a big flower quilt. And so if you like any of those things, just run over to the channel and click on the projects, and you can enjoy all the things that we're making together. All right, friends, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. My finger is on the mend. Hopefully, I'll be back to using both of my fingers, and you don't realize how much you use your hands until you have an injury. But definitely be careful out there with that rotary cutter. I was using a little skinny ruler. From now on, I'm going to stick to maybe a bigger ruler because I had like a little skinny 2.5-inch ruler, and that's when I injured my hand. So I'm going to be using a square instead of a little rectangle from now on. So be careful, friends. Have a wonderful Sunday. Go out there and play with some markers, play with some paint, get out some brushes. You just don't know what you're going to create. I hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday, and I will see you guys later. Okay? Bye-bye, everybody. Don't forget to hit like and then leave a comment down below if you enjoy the things on this channel. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you guys later, okay?